Hello, I'm Joshua Gordon from the Sports Conflict Institute. I'm joined by Duncan Fletcher. Duncan.
Josh, how you doing today? As you said, I'm Duncan Fletcher from Game Change. Glad to be here today to talk to you about athlete development.
So, Duncan, I think we want to pull up a slideshow today and give folks, in particular athletic directors, coaches, athletes, and even supporters, some insight into what athlete development is and why they really should care about this subject. And it's an area of expertise for you. So, mostly I'm going to turn over the slideshow to you, and then I will probably have some questions for you along the way as well.
Yeah, let's have some fun with this. Again, like you said, this is kind of the group that we want to hit as athletic directors, coaches, and kind of give them a brief introduction to what athlete development is about. So what we'll do is we'll hop into a slide presentation. And really what we're going to talk about, what it is, why it matters, and how people can benefit. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to migrate into the presentation here. And what we're going to do is just sort of have a conversation that hopefully provides a good overview on what we're trying to accomplish.
All right.
Is that coming through for you at your end?
I see it. It looks fantastic. Fire away.
All right, let's get into it. So this is a great quote that was shared with me when I was actually coaching. So I coached Division I hockey for about 5 years, and one of the things that I came away with was, coaching, especially at the collegiate level, isn't about winning or losing. And what I heard was this really high-level coach talk about the challenges that he faced really wasn't the winning or the losing. It was the fact that he knew that his career hinged on the decisions that were made by kids who really were away from home for the first time. And as you know, sometimes when kids go away from home for the very first time, some of the decision making is not necessarily the best. Although I'm sure, Josh, when you were away from school the first time, it was all golden, right?
Yeah, my decision making was well beyond my years, but a different era, a different time. You're absolutely right, Duncan. I mean, this is a different industry in the sense that really the sports industry does rely on the young as its major workforce, whereas most industries, the seniority tends to rule. It's a very different industry in that way.
Absolutely. And like I said, this quote stuck with me. I was about 24, 25 when I heard it, and it's really stuck with me to this day, and it's really impacted how I view what I do today in terms of athlete development, both at the professional and the collegiate level. So again, really it's all about decision making and making sure that athletes are optimized for success away from the game. And again, if you really boil it down to is that if you're a coach, and even if you're an athletic director, basically you're at the whim of one bad decision of an 18 to 22-year-old kid. And I think that really needs to be the message that comes away with it, is that bad decisions that occur, when they do happen, they're going to have an impact. Whether it's a small one or a big one, it's all going to boil down to a bad decision. And one of the things that I always kind of like to talk about is when typically are these bad decisions happening? Now, in the context of hockey, are they happening on or off the ice? When you're talking to coaches that are coaching collegiately, they're not going to tell you that the major issues they face in terms of bad decisions are happening on the ice. They're almost always happening off the ice. And what I always kind of come back to, well, if you know that these decisions are happening away from the arena and you know that they're going to have an impact on your team, the question I want to ask the coaches and the athletic directors is, well, is winning important to you? And of course, the question comes back, are your athletes also important to you? So those are two big things, right? When you're a coach and you're athletic director, winning and your athletes. So are those important to you? And of course, if you look at it from the professional level, you start asking general managers, coaches, agents, and again, athletic directors. If you ask that question, is winning important to you and are your players important to you, they always answer the same way. Yeah, absolutely. These guys are absolutely critical to us. These things matter. But when you look at it in practice, what we're seeing is in fact that, well, no, those issues aren't really taken into full consideration when you're developing a program, when you're developing an athletic department, because if you're not taking into context what is happening away from the field, the court, the ice surface, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And that's exactly what we want to talk about here is, so why? And it's really about this big piece of the puzzle. And the puzzle that we're talking about here is if you only have an athlete, a student athlete for, let's say, 3 hours a day, then you're talking about the other 21 hours, there's nobody there. There's nobody really overseeing what this student is doing. There's no plan in place to help optimize that student athlete, that athlete for success, both either in the classroom or away from the classroom. So I think that's the big message that I want to get across here, is that one of the things that we try and share is that we're talking about the 21 hours when, as a coach, as an assistant coach, as an athletic director, maybe you're not in front of the athletes obviously all the time, but you're not going to be in front of these guys all 24 hours a day. So that's kind of why we talked about this idea of this whole athlete approach. And basically what we're talking about is you need to care about the entire person, not only what they're doing as a student, not only what they're doing as an athlete, but also how are they doing socially, how are they interacting at the interpersonal level, how are they doing with their family. All of these different things come into play in terms of how you manage an athlete for long-term success, both as an athlete and as a person in general.
And Duncan, it sounds like the crux of what you're saying here too is that if you really care about performance on the ice or on the field, that these things that are happening away matter a lot more than people are often giving credit to.
Well, absolutely, and that's kind of what we're gonna try and conclude on, is that all this is so critical to driving performance. Because one of the things I think that that I hear anyway is that, well, athlete development really isn't about driving on-field performance or on-court performance, when in fact that's really all it's about. And I think that until the industry or the field, or however you want to describe it, really gets across that this is really at the end of the day about performance, in a lot of ways we may be missing the boat. But I think that's the key message that I want to get across, is that by focusing on those other 21 hours, that you're going to drive potentially significant performance gains. And then, well, how do you do that? How do you actually go out and identify what you can do to drive performance when you're not even talking about what's taking place on the practice field or on the ice? Basically what we're talking about is you need data. And I think one of the key pieces is you got to go and you got to talk to your athletes, you have to talk to your coaches, and you have to get as much data as you can so you can make data-driven, or at the very least, data-informed decisions about what's taking place. So that's a key piece of the puzzle. You got to go out and get data so that you can actually make good decisions about what you want to do to address what's taking place away from the ice, away from the playing surface, so that you can actually put together processes and interventions in place that are going to have an impact. And again, that's what you're looking for, is by collecting that data, you're going to get these inflection points that you can identify. Those inflection points are going to allow you to go, okay, where can we really put a finger in the dam? Really, where can we have the most positive impact we possibly can, so that we're really going to drive change? And I think that's a big key about not only in our work, but Josh, in the work that you do in terms of identifying cultures. You're really looking to find those key inflection points where you can have the most impact on a particular group of people. So some people say, well, when you're talking about doing that, what are you really doing? Well, to borrow a term, it's really about neck up. It's like what's going on between the ears. So again, athlete development in this context is we're not talking about, helping a player run faster, eat better necessarily. We're not talking about them having them, understand tactics. We're really talking about helping them optimize what's going on between their ears so that they're primed for success, both on and off the playing surface. And again, like you touched on, Josh, really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is optimize the athlete for performance. And I think that's the key piece of the puzzle that, again, to kind of hammer it home is, unless coaches and athletic directors are taking steps to move towards performance, then a lot of this stuff isn't going to resonate. It's not going to mean anything to coaches. It's going to be just tangential to players. But if you put it in the context that, hey, the reason why we're focused on addressing these other 21 hours is because we want you to not only be a better student and not only be a better person, but we want you to be a better athlete. We want you to have better stats. We want you to have more impact in games. And I think if the approach that schools and institutions take in terms of working with coaches and working with athletes, it's positioned as we are here to drive performance by focusing on these other areas. That is where these kinds of initiatives can take root and result in long-term cultural change that can really have a meaningful impact in a school and an athletic department. That's pretty good, Josh. I like the sound effects. That's fantastic.
Duncan, I think really some fantastic food for thought for folks to consider. I do think that disconnect often between all the things that happen away from playing and the things that happen between, that merge is really critical. What you're ascribing to.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I think you can hammer it home over and over and over again. And I think really when you walk away from what we're trying to do, or you're trying to understand what we're trying to do, it really is about performance. Because if you're not driving performance, it's not really going to resonate. And I think that's exactly at the end of the day what athletic directors, coaches, and players should really understand is that, hey, if you want to get better, you're really going to have to take these other pieces of a puzzle into consideration.
Well, Duncan, thanks for sharing your expertise on this today, and let's do it again soon.
Sounds good, Josh. Thanks for having me on.